Hello everybody, and welcome back to Rules as Written. My name is Zach, and on this channel I make content for 2024 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So normally I focus on character builds, and every once in a while a little topic that I like to discuss, but this afternoon I saw the new Errata that just came out on DnD Beyond for the 2024 Player's Handbook. So being pretty excited about the changes, I decided it might be a good idea to put out a video so I could get in touch with my subscribers and talk about my thoughts on the changes, maybe get a little discourse going on what you guys think, possible implications on, build mechanics and things like that. So I haven't actually gotten a chance to read this article yet. I've been saving it so I could react to it fully authentically in the moment here. So I got my Player's Handbook here with me. I'm going to be going through the list, going to the corresponding page, and sharing my thoughts. Without further ado, let's dive in. So we're not getting any class or subclass changes with this errata here. And it starts out with Chapter 4, Character Origins on page 192, specifically the Goliath. Ever since the new books came out, the Goliath has definitely been one of my favorite races to theorycraft with. Getting all these different giant ancestry traits in there gives a lot of versatility to a character, especially a martial character who might not have any tricks up their sleeve except bonk, bonk, and bonk again. Okay, so Chapter 4, Character Origins, Goliath traits. In the powerful build trait, the sentence, "You have advantage on any saving throw," is now "You have advantage on any ability check." So this just seems to be a correction as far as I can tell, because the way it's originally printed, "You have advantage on any saving throw you make to end the grappled condition." The truth of the matter is you don't make a saving throw to end a grappled condition. You make a saving throw to avoid the grappled condition. Once you are already grappled, you make an ability check to end the grappled condition. So this is just a correction as far as player-to-player grapples go. There might be a case with a monster where you would have been making a saving throw to end the grappled condition, and that will no longer come into play. It depends on what monster rules you're using, what their specific features are. I don't have the monster manual just yet. I don't do a lot of DMing. I'm mainly a player, so I'm not sure about that. But as far as this goes, this doesn't look like a nerf or anything like that to me. This just looks like a correction. So that's the only thing from Chapter 4 that we're getting any changes. Next, we're moving on to Chapter 5, the feats. This is a place that I spend a lot of time. So the first change is going to be to the grappler feat. In the fast wrestler benefit, your speed isn't halved when you move has been changed to "You don't have to spend extra movement to move." Again, just another correction here. When you are grappling a creature, you have to spend an extra 1 foot of movement for every foot that you move. So this was kind of just incorrect before, so now it's correct again. Next, we are adjusting the poisoner feat on page 206. Great, so in the 4th sentence of Brew Poison, it says they have changed the sentence "until you hit with a poisoned item" to "until you deal damage with a poisoned item." Yeah, so that makes sense. So the poisoner feat lets you, as a bonus action, poison your weapons so that the next time you hit, it deals extra poison damage, and then that charge is gone. This is actually a little bit of a buff to the feat, because let's say, for instance, you were attacking a creature who was immune to poison damage. The way it read before, once you hit them, even if you didn't do any poison damage, the poison charge would be gone. But now that poison remains until it actually deals damage. This is also going to come into play if you're up against something like a Goliath player character who can reduce the damage they take as a reaction, or maybe even a monk with their deflect energy, if that works here. I can't quite remember. But yeah, that's a buff to the poisoner feat, which was already a pretty exciting feat that I'm a big fan of. So that's a good one. All right, next one, we are adjusting the telekinetic feat on page 208. In the minor telekinesis benefit's 2nd sentence, its range is increased by 30 feet. It's now its range and the distance it can be away from you increases by 30 feet. Great, so this is actually affecting the way that the telekinetic feat allows you to use the Mage Hand spell. So this is sort of just another quality of life, because you're increasing the range of the spell, but before this, Mage Hand would automatically end if the spell was a certain number of feet away from you. So now not only can you manipulate the hand further out, but it also won't end. So that's kind of how it should have been playing anyway, so this just feels like a little adjustment. All right, next is the Chapter 6 on equipment. This looks like it's just going to be another correction. Page 219. What it says here is, in the subheading for the shield category, shield is now shield, utilize action to don or doff. So all the other armor types tell you how long it takes to put them on or off. A minute for light, 5 minutes for medium, 10 minutes for heavy armor. Shield is going to be an action to don or doff. All right, now we're going to get into the good bits here, which is actually the spells. So let me flip over to these spells here real quick. All right, first off, we're taking a look at animal shapes on page 240. The spell's last paragraph has been replaced with the following. The target gains a number of temporary hit points equal to the hit points of the first form into which which it shape shifts. These temporary hit points vanish if any remain when the spell ends. The transformation lasts for the duration or until the target ends it as a bonus action. The way that animal shapes works is that you can actually, according to the first paragraph of the spell, on later turns you can take a magic action to transform the targets again. And what the last paragraph originally said was that the target gains a number of temporary hit points equal to the beast form's hit points. The impression there was that if you changed to a new form, you would then once again gain temporary hit points equal to that form's total hit points, meaning that you could use this spell to replenish those temporary hit points over and over. That was clearly not the intention. We know now you only get the temporary hit points for the first form you transform into, and then as you transform into other forms, you're still going to retain that same pool of temporary hit points. This kind of means that you should be looking to transform into something with a lot of temporary hit points. Go for some massive, huge beast with a bunch of hit points first, and then for those remaining 24 hours, transform into whatever utility creature you want so that you can retain that large pool of hit points from the initial transformation. At least that's how I see it. Let me know what you guys think, if there's a way to make this more effective. All right, next we're moving to page 254, and we're looking at the Conjure Elemental spell. The change is in the using a higher level spell slot subsection, 2d8 is now replaced with 1d8. So normally this spell conjures an elemental of your choice, which occupies a space on the battlefield. Whenever an enemy enters that space, they take damage of the spirit's type and they get restrained. And before, fairly powerful spell here, every spell slot level above 5th would increase the damage by 2d8. So that's 8d8 at 5th level, and then 10, 12, so on and so forth. They're bringing that damage down a little bit, and they're just doing 1d8 for each spell slot level above 1st. So a bit of a nerf on this spell. Moving on, we got Conjure Fey on page 255. The damage increases by 2d12 for each spell slot level above 6th is now being changed to the damage increases by 1d12 for each spell slot level above 6. So yeah, scaling damage has been a problem in this book, and looks like they're cutting that back. And next is the big one, the huge damaging spell that everybody was worried about, Conjure Minor Elementals on page 254. For my book, it's 255. This is the next spell after Conjure Fey. Using a higher level spell slot subsection, 2d8 is now 1d8. Yep, so this is a 4th level spell that adds 2d8 elemental damage to your attacks. Acid, cold, fire, or lightning, your choice when you make the attack. It used to increase by 2d8 each spell slot level above 4. I talked about this in my Bladesinger video when I used this spell out, the Tortle Bladesinger, but I said it was far too powerful back then, which is a pretty common opinion in the community. So now they're cutting back on that. This damage scaling is now increasing by 1d8 per spell slot level above 4th. Honestly, I think that's still a little strong in my opinion. It's not as absolutely busted as it used to be. You're not getting, double-digit d8s out of this anymore. But think about this in comparison to a spell like Spirit Shroud, a 3rd level spell that increases the damage your attacks deal by 1d8, necrotic, radiant, or cold. That damage increases by 1d8 for every 2 spell slot levels above 3rd, so 5, 7, and 9. Whereas this one is 1d8 for every spell slot level above 4th. So you're still way outpacing the damage of something like Spirit Shroud. The one point that you could make here is that Conjure Minor Elementals takes an action to cast, whereas Spirit Shroud is a bonus action, so you can bonus action cast Spirit Shroud, still make attacks with your action, whereas Conjure Minor Elemental, you're blowing your action on it. Yeah, that's still pretty strong. I'm probably going to start using it in the videos from now on, just because it's not as horrendous as it used to be, and I might even try it out at the table, but I think I'll still have a disclaimer that this is a strong spell, and I wouldn't be too surprised if some DMs are still banning it. Yeah, only 7th level you're getting 2d8 extra damage, whereas with Spirit Shroud you have to wait till 9th level to get that much extra damage. And then at 9th level you'd be dealing 3d8 extra damage. Every 2 levels after that you're getting an extra 1d8 damage on every single attack that you make. That's pretty strong. That was the big one. That was definitely the big one. So let's move on and look at some more. Okay, so this one actually looks like maybe it's a typo correction. What this one says with Conjure Woodland Beings is, in the using a higher level spell slot subsection, level above 5 is now level above 4. So Conjure Woodland Beings is a 4th level spell, and it used to say that the damage increases by each spell slot level above 5th, implying that if you cast this with a 5th level spell slot, it's going to deal the same amount of damage as a 4th level spell slot. That, however, is no longer true. It is now increasing at every spell slot level above 4. So I think that that's a typo, honestly. All right, moving on, we have Giant Insect on page 279. In the HP entry, 10 for each spell level is now 10 for each spell level above 4. Before, the way we were reading it, it was stronger than it is now. So this is a 4th level spell slot that summons a giant insect. The giant insect has 30 hit points. Before, it was 30 plus 10 for each spell level. So the implication there would be that it is actually 70 because it's a 4th level spell slot, so you're adding 4 times 10 to 30. However, now they are saying that no, that's not how it's supposed to be. It's 10 for each spell level above 4th. So this insect is going to start out with 30 hit points at a 4th level spell slot and increase by 10 hit points for each spell level above 4th. Bit of a nerf, but that's probably how it was always intended. I don't think this is meant to be a nerf. I think this is a typo correction. Next, we're moving on to polymorph on page 306. In the second paragraph of the spell's description, the following sentence has been added after the first. These temporary hit points vanish if any remain when the spell ends. Prior to this, in the spell, it says the target gains a number of temporary hit points equal to the hit points of the beast form. The spell ends early on the target if it has no temporary hit points left. So the impression there was that you could end the spell and keep the temporary hit points. But this is not a spell that's meant to just give you temporary hit points. That's, if you want something like that, go for Armor of Agathis or False Life. When the form ends, you lose the temporary hit points. That's more in change with what it probably was supposed to be from the beginning. Next, we have Shape Change, another temporary hit points thing, just like animal shapes, polymorph. The second paragraph of the spell's description has been replaced with the following. When you cast the spell, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the hit points of the first form into which you shapeshift. These temporary hit points vanish if any remain when the spell ends. Yeah, so exactly the same as animal shapes that we discussed earlier. With this spell, while it's in effect, you can transform into other shapes, and the impression then was that you would change the number of temporary hit points you have based on the shape that you get to, possibly refilling, maybe losing some, depending on how many you have at that point. But no, now it's in line with the rest of these. To maximize this spell's effectiveness, as far as I'm concerned, you're going to want to shapeshift into a creature with a lot of hit points first, and then start, swapping out utility, whatever the situation demands. Now, our final spell change that we're looking at here is True Polymorph on page 335. In the second paragraph of the Creature into Creature subsection, the second sentence has been replaced with, these temporary hit points vanish if any remain when the spell ends. Exactly the same as the weaker version of this spell, Polymorph, states, when the spell ends, the temporary hit points are gone. Again, this just looks like a correction to me, not an intentional buff or nerf. Okay, and that's it for the spells section. However, we still have some changes to the appendix to take a look at. First off is in the Appendix B, the creature stat blocks. All stat blocks on pages 346 to 359 have been replaced with the Monster Manual versions. Now, like I said, I haven't read the Monster Manual yet. I tend to focus more on, player character builds. I don't DM a campaign right now, so I haven't really had the need to read through monsters and see their changes and anything like that. From a player's point of view, this is a little bit of a bummer to me because I like the player's handbook to be totally inclusive, whereas now rules is written if I'm playing something like a druid or even a bard who, likes to polymorph. All of these animal stat blocks in the book are no longer the rules is written proper stat blocks. So I'm going to need to look at the monster manual every time that I want to transform into a beast form, even if I have that beast form printed in this book. So from a quality of life standpoint, that's a bit of a shame to me. Let me know in the comments down below, everybody, if these stat blocks are even all that different. I don't know just yet, but on first glance, that seems like a bit of a bummer to me. All right, now we have a bit of changes to the Appendix C rules glossary, starting with grappling. In the grappling entry, the heading escaping a grapple is now ending a grapple. Also, the following sentence has been added to the end of the subsection. In addition, the grappler can release the target at any time, no action required. Yeah, this isn't really too much to talk about here. They prefer to call it ending a grapple instead of escaping a grapple. I think that language kind of makes strength and dex seem a little more equal, whereas escaping a grapple sounds a little more dexterity based. I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. Let me know. But it's nice that a creature can end the grapple at any time, no action required. That's probably how most people have been playing it anyway. I don't imagine that a reasonable DM would tell you that you need to use your action to let go of something, especially when you have all this precedent in the book for dropping weapons, swapping weapons as part of attacks. Player characters have never been so dexterous with their hands as they are in this version of the player's handbook, so makes sense to me. All right, and last but not least, there's been a change to the hide action. On page 368, in the second paragraph, you have the invisible condition is now you have the invisible condition while hidden. In the third paragraph, the condition ends on you is now you stop being hidden. Yeah, this is just a little bit of grammar fixing. I always thought it was a little weird that hiding now gives you the invisible condition. I get that they're trying to streamline conditions a little bit. They changed grapple, they're changing hide in regards to the 2024 handbook, but it just feels so weird to hide and then say I am invisible. Invisible feels like a separate thing from being hidden, but rules-wise, I guess they are exactly the same, so it's not that big of a difference. And then, therefore, with that second point, it says you stop being hidden if any of the following occurs, and then if those things occur, you stop being hidden. therefore you are no longer invisible. So they're kind of just adding an extra dominoing step back into it. You stop being hidden, you lose the invisible condition, as opposed to saying you lose the invisible condition if you do any of these things. Because maybe there were some people making arguments that even though you lost the invisible condition, you might still be hidden, in which case you would get the invisible condition back. So they're just clearing it up a little bit. And yeah, that's all there is to the player's handbook changes. There's some changes to the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, but I don't really work with those books very often. I've never read them, made videos on them, so I didn't think it was pertinent for me to share my thoughts. Yeah, so far to me, it just looks like a lot of typo and grammar fixes, as well as a few nerfs to all those conjure spells, which is perfectly acceptable to me. Those conjure spells have always scaled ridiculously, so cutting those back a little bit is definitely a good thing. All right, well, thanks for tuning in with me here and checking out these erratas. Let me know what you think of all the changes in the comments down below. If there's anything I didn't pick up on, some builds that are going to change other than just less damage from druids and wizards, let me know. I'd be glad to hear you guys' thoughts. And thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys on Monday for another original character build.